And welcome everybody to today's webinar. I appreciate you taking the time for this short break webinar, and hopefully when you leave you'll have a little better understanding of what VDI is, and you have a vocabulary to share with your customers and to enrich the discussions around opportunities for Nitro application acceleration solutions. As we begin, what we typically talk about here is the data deluge and the challenge that IT has in managing large amounts of data, large amounts of different and new and emerging infrastructure and architectures, from virtualization to social media mobility, big data analytics, cloud computing, real-time data knowledge, as well as virtualization, which of course is the cornerstone to today's discussion around virtualizing desktops. Along with all this technology that needs to be understood is the never-ending growth in data year over year over year, near linear growth of the explosion and data deluge of rich data, both structured and unstructured, to serve the communities. So let's get a little working definition of what desktop virtualization really is. It's virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI. This is the term that you'll be hearing. It's really the ability to host a desktop OS within a virtual machine on a server. So we've been talking about virtualization in servers for years and years and years, and of course there's very big players from VMware to Hyper-V and Xen and all other types of virtualization. This is the ability to host a desktop OS within a VM or a virtual machine on a server and serve it to many different clients. It's a variation of the traditional client-server compute model. It's an extension to the thin client concept, a thin client being operating systems hosted on a server and keystrokes and desktop usability from a thin client. So this is really one server to service the processing needs of many individual users with the ability to scale, where each user can have an operating system and applications that reside on the server and are served to them running as a virtual machine. So operating systems and applications will run on the desktop or the server, depending on the use case, and we'll get into that a little bit. But the server is really going to store the application data, the user profiles and definitions, configuration settings, and permissions. Why that's so important is because you could then apply data center disciplines to the protection and accessibility to this data, where individual desktops, laptops, mobility devices may or may not have those same levels of security, data protection, deduplication, and accessibility availability. So you're really separating, just as in any virtualization environment, you're separating the CPU, the data, the application, and in this case now the display, using the client-server model, from the abstraction from the hardware. And that's basically what VDI is. It's the ability to serve individual desktops to many users, and there's lots of advantages. Well, really, in a very high level, a simple picture, if you take today's physical desktop architecture, which most of us use, that is a laptop, or in the case of very high-end users, a desktop, if you abstract that down to a VM, a single VM on a server, a single virtual machine, you can now host an operating system image and applications, and by use of hypervisors, abstract that from the hardware, get the benefit and economies of scale on compute cycles, memory, and horsepower, and serve many users. And that turns into, as you see at the far right-hand side, a virtual machine serving a virtual desktop. That's the most simplistic, high-level view you can get of VDI. So if you can do that with one desktop, you could certainly do it with many desktops. And in this particular picture, you see what would be a rack of servers virtualized with many different types of applications and operating systems that have the ability to be served to either a group of users using the same types of applications and operating systems, or to individual servers with custom requirements, and we'll talk about that. And again, I can't stress enough the benefits of the data center disciplines on the back end is the ability to load balance across servers and the resiliency you get with remote replication, with failures in migrating to different virtual machines as is required. And this can scale, just as in any virtual environment, can scale very nicely and get real great cost and control within the data center infrastructure. This is a snapshot of what a VMware infrastructure, a very simplistic VMware infrastructure might look like. And as it's marketed as a very simple infrastructure, the takeaway really is it's not too simple. There's many different software layers you need to install, lots of management and profiling that needs to be done to understand the use cases of many different types of users, lots of different types of applications. There's a lot of work and effort that goes into planning a VDI deployment. And this is, in the market, this has been one of the downsides to widespread adoption. It's got the promise of lots of scale and lots of control and manageability, but the upfront planning for it, both in terms of networking, user profiling, application profiling, and most importantly to us, storage is key ingredients to a successful deployment of VDI. Each of these individual applications manage different parts of the VDI infrastructure, from delivering the golden images to delivering the apps and the OS images to delivering custom images, either to thin clients or to zero clients or virtual desktop clients. So there's lots of different high-powered software that goes into the management of VDI. So VDI claims lots of benefits. Centralized management of user desktops. Of course, it makes it much easier to deploy patches and make sure that the security that the corporations require are applied and deployed to all their users. I'm sure many of us get notices, specifically with Windows, that there's critical security patches that need to be applied, and please apply them and reboot your system. The fact of the matter is we don't all do that. We only reboot our laptops when we absolutely positively have to, mostly around the fact that it's hanging or it's acting really slow, and we go ahead and reboot and those patches are applied and we're back up to security. Now, back-end security is much more robust. Data center security is much more robust than front-end or client security. So VDI will really help with that. It enables IT professionals to deploy desktops very fast, very easily. Instead of re-imaging laptops from one person to one person, they can deploy patches and new images to new employees or redeploy images, operating systems, and applications to employees very quickly. This is a real good control point to help make sure that user environments are up to date and very secure. Some desktop virtualization variants also build in security features such as encrypting the data on the server as well as encrypting the data over the network. So it provides a very robust, highly secure infrastructure both for standard clients as well as mobility clients. And really, if you can imagine the promise of a virtual desktop on a mobile device, you could really start seeing the benefits. Can you imagine getting the same desktop on your iPad or that you get on your laptop or even on your phone and using the same types of resources? As long as you have a network connection, which we'll talk about, you've got the same desktop and you can do work wherever you are, whenever you want. So the flexibility and the centralized control of VDI is really, really important, both to IT management and CIOs, as well as to end users with the flexibility to move and work and be very productive wherever they are with the appropriate security and availability to and access to their data. So we kind of talked about cost and control. If I broke it down, you know, a cost savings is simpler provisioning of new desktops. This, if you pay $100 for a desktop, you know, add 4 times more to that, $400 to manage that laptop or desktop. By deploying VDI, you take that management cost, that post-deployment management cost out of the picture. The cost of VDI is really in the planning and the initial deployment. Once it's deployed, you get all the cost benefits of simpler provisioning of new desktops. You also have a much lower cost of deploying new applications. You can either deploy applications per use case or by actually serving the application on top of the OS image to the client, or you could centrally manage applications and have users actually access and get control of the application they need when they need it. So they're not using it. It's not installed locally on their laptop. And that's a very good cost control access point. A control point would be desktop image management capabilities. For the IT, to automate this image management capability is a very powerful control point for IT. You really reduce the number of help desk calls. It's centrally managed. There's lots of very robust software available today to do that, both in very high-end enterprise VMware deployments as well as in appliances. So appliances become a very important piece to VDI because an appliance will take the complexity of widespread enterprise deployment and converge a lot of the provisioning, a lot of the scale, a lot of the profiling and complexity out of the initial deployment and integrate it into an appliance that does it all for you. So you'll see a lot of VDI appliances available in the market. Each one of these appliances, whether it's a high-end enterprise server data center deployment or a data center with appliance deployment, you'll see opportunities for acceleration in all of these, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Of course, another control point is the increased data security. There's just typically more security in a data center than there is in the front-end client environment. So that's a great control point for IT to take a hard look at VDI and the benefits of VDI. The longer refresh cycle for client desktop infrastructure. Well, we typically get our laptops replaced every 18 months to 3 years, depending on the policies of the corporation. By deploying operating systems, applications, user profiles, images, security settings from the data center through VDI, you lengthen the life cycle of the client device. So that it's a real value to IT to not have to refresh laptops so often. And by using BYOD, bring your own device, you actually have scale in the types of devices that can be used. Another control point is secure remote access to the enterprise desktop environment. By applying data center networking security features into the deployment, you really get that encryption and data security, firewall access to applications, sensitive application data, and you can control that much better on who gets it, when do they get it, and how it's protected. So it's a very good control point to an IT shop. So what we talked about is really on the promise of VDI is load balancing and resilience by using data center disciplines to protect and manage your data and deployment. Faster PC deployment is a cost and control point benefit to VDI. It's lower power consumption. You don't have it's much greener. Of course, virtualization by its very nature is much greener. You're doing more with less servers. If you properly deploy storage on this, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, you could have a very good cost performance benefit with traditional spinning media and applying flash in the right ways. And it's centrally managed and backed up, and backing up is very important. So sensitive data has a much better opportunity for replication and backup than it does if it's residing on someone's client. You could apply those data center disciplines and how you manage your data if it's on the server. Those security practices and principles are in place. And you don't have to depend on end users to make sure that they're connected to a network and they're backing up their data and their sensitive data isn't left in an airport or a taxi on a laptop. This is a much better way to do it. All right, let's talk about some of the opposite end, the drags on VDI adoption. Well, there's the potential performance degradation, real and perceived. The perception from end users is, hey, I have to be on the network and I have to get my OS image and applications served to me. I'm definitely not going to have, and I have a lower powered client, I'm definitely not going to get the same type of performance that I'm getting in a traditional client server package. Some of that is true, some of it is perceived. If the planning for storage and the ability to scale with the users is done effectively and correctly, then the promise of VDI is you'll get no worse performance than you're getting in your traditional model. So you get all the benefits of VDI without suffering on the performance, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Network security and reliability. You are dependent in a VDI infrastructure to have network access for true VDI adoption. Now, there is the ability in VDI infrastructure to have what's called check-out, check-in. So you can check out your desktop. For instance, if you're on a plane without the internet, you could check out your desktop, do all your work on the plane with all of your data, all of your permissions, all of your applications, and then when you land and you connect into the network, it'll check back into the server. There is that ability. But for day-to-day business use, you are dependent on network security and reliability. So as much as storage planning is important, network planning is important for an appropriate, effective VDI deployment. Difficulty in running certain complex applications. So there's going to be power users. And there's this concept in VDI of stateful versus stateless deployments. So a stateful deployment would be a power user that needs applications that aren't universally deployed. And you can manage that within the VDI infrastructure. You can manage it with specific images and applications that are served directly to those power users. So they could also check out their entire desktop and work and get all the resources locally that they need for their very high-powered, customized environment, and then check it back in. So there are ways to get around the complex applications. And if anybody wants to look at, there's 100,000 videos on VDI deployment, and VMware in particular has done a very good job at presenting VDI both with products and with multimedia, so you could see what that looks like. The complexity and high cost of VDI deployment is also a drag. I talked about profiling. This becomes really important. You have to understand your application inventories and licensing, the characterizations of those applications, and the characterizations of the user profiles. So you need to do a lot of front-end work, which makes it a drag on IT in particular to deploy VDI. I can't stress enough how server performance and capacity will make your VDI or your customer's VDI deployment a success or failure. What you see with server performance and capacity is that typically when you're prototyping VDI pre-production, you are serving, let's say, 100 clients, and you've got enough storage and performance to serve 100 clients. Once you scale that to 1,000, what you'll find is you haven't provisioned enough. And there is a concept of under-provisioning and over-provisioning on VDI that's a perfect play for flash acceleration so that you get the economies of scale with the price per gigabyte of traditional spinning media and the cost per I/O and latency benefits, low latency benefits of flash. So server performance and capacity and storage performance and capacity go hand in hand. Network performance, reliability, and security, we talked about that a few bullets earlier, but it's very important to have a balanced architecture so that you could scale your users, you could have access to the servers, you could deploy your OS images and your applications, user profiles and permissions in an effective, reliable, and highly secure manner. So I talked a little bit about appliance-based VDI solutions as well as enterprise-based pure virtualization deployments where you're using a product like VMware to manage your entire VDI complex. Or you could buy or integrate specific, or if your customers are developing appliances, Flash becomes a very, very important part to that overall solution. And we've got a case study currently available, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. All right, so as, again, a pretty picture, the flexibility and complexity are two orthogonal dynamics to VDI. You really want to serve on the promise to your clients of performance and reliability, accessibility, and scale to many different types of devices, from thin clients where you're actually hosting an OS and application on a server, and the client then in keystrokes are being accessed to the server, to traditional laptops, power users, to PC power users, workstation power users, to BYOD. So that could be tablets, iPads, iPhones, etc. And you want a similar experience, a familiar experience, no matter what device you're using. Familiarity is a very important dynamic to VDI. So what you see on one device, you see on another device, you use it the same, you have the same access, performance, and capabilities. So that's a very important dynamic to VDI, to successful VDI deployment. So I talked a little bit about profiling. There's a lot that goes into that. You have to pick through how the desktop applications are structured and where they're stored, the management of those and licensing of those golden masters. Custom images for power users needs to be deployed. It's got to be secure, and you have to have access to sensitive data. You have to have firewalls up to make sure that only those that need access to sensitive data are getting it. The server cores and networking need to be profiled as well as the storage, whether it be SAN storage in large enterprises, DAS storage in hybrid environments. You need low latency, and you need scale. You need to go from 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 users without over-provisioning all this stuff. Because once you start over-provisioning, the cost-benefit of VDI is washed out. So upfront profiling is a very important piece to this, and storage will play a significant role in the overall performance of VDI. Okay, Scott, thanks. It's really interesting, but who cares? What does any of this have to do with storage? Because that's what I'm selling. Good question. Well, let's understand the storage cost for desktop virtualization. So what happens, there's a concept called boot storm, a login storm. This is when in a VDI infrastructure environment, your users are all logging in at the same time. They're all booting an OS image at the same time. This creates an enormous amount of traffic on network infrastructure and server core, memory, and storage infrastructure. What happens is what looks like lots of sequential access actually becomes very highly random. And this produces lots of good, small block, random, hot data that's essential to apply Flash to. Because when you apply Flash to hot data, you're then getting the most important data to your desktop clients as quickly as possible. Also, the I/O patterns are going to be very write intensive. As you check in, check out, and ask for access and update your user profiles and user data, that becomes very write intensive. So you need to have the appropriate storage media, whether it be traditional spinning, all SSD or Flash, or a combination of those. You need to make sure that you've got the right product to serve the right type of I/O traffic. Provisioning storage for VDI will typically require 30 to 50% more capacity So in order to serve all these users, you're going to need 30 to 50% more capacity than in traditional client-server packages. If you don't do that, VDI storage will appear to run about 50% slower than on a dedicated application server. So understanding the storage, server, and network traffic is very important. By applying flash in the right environment, you can reduce the cost of traditional media and get that benefit of dollars per gigabyte and dollar per I/O. VDI storage is typically provisioned with enterprise-level SAS, 10K, 15K, and that's 30 to 50 times higher gigabyte than traditional desktop media. So you have to keep that in mind. Your data is not residing locally any longer. It's residing in a data center with data center security accessibility. So you're not using very cheap SATA drives on a laptop. You're taking advantage of economies of scale on the back end. So while it costs more, properly deployed, the cost and control benefits of VDI will outweigh the upfront integration and deployment of a production VDI environment. All right, this is directly from CIO.com, so it's not made up. It's been written by a very reputable media outlet, CIO.com. So we have a customer that has deployed an appliance, Tangent, and when they were assessing the requirements that they were going to need to serve their customers and to scale their customers, they quickly came to an understanding that disk I/O was going to be the bottleneck. You don't want to over-provision. It's the same message as in traditional server flash acceleration or database acceleration. Traditionally, what people do is over-provision their storage to serve the I/Os that are required for their users to get the performance and access to the data. For the same reason that you can get benefit from applying flash in database environments, you're going to get that same benefit by applying flash effectively and correctly in VDI environments. What Tangent found was to achieve their target VD densities, the ability to scale, they needed to solve this disk I/O problem. And by applying Nitro Mega-RAID, they got the benefit of data security. This is a DAS appliance. The ability to apply data security, RAID protection, and flash in an integrated solution. So it'll serve very dense appliances very well. A low profile, 100, 200, 800 gigabyte flash with RAID capabilities and Nitro Mega-RAID makes it ideal for DAS appliances. And this is what they found. And I'm sure that case study will be posted on our smarterwaytofaster.com website as well as our lsi.com/channel website. So if you want to read more about what Tangent did, I encourage you to go up to our websites and do that. VMware guidance is really around making sure that your WAN and LANs are available, accessible, and scalable enough to serve lots and lots of different organizations, from corporate organizations to large branch-based operations. And finally, that desktop virtualization storage is understood, and dedupe. So VDI, because there's a lot of the same data being served, there's a lot of opportunity for data deduplication within this. So that becomes another important factor in the planning part. Because there's a full copy of each desktop, storage becomes very prohibitive if you're not applying data deduplication and acceleration through use of flash. These are the two kind of main ingredients to understanding your back-end storage requirements. Let's talk really quick about this boot storm or shift change in IOPS. If you look at the bottom bar, this is what you're traditionally going to be provisioned on a normal workload for storage. You'll see that there's a big bump, a big spike in the IOPS, and this is the boot storm. This is when everyone gets in. This is when everyone gets in the morning and boots on and logs on. So they're going to boot their OS image. They're going to log on. This creates an enormous stress to the servers and the storage because everybody, and think of thousands and tens of thousands of users, are logging in at the same time. So under-provisioning isn't going to do it. Over-provisioning to meet the peak requirements is also not going to do it. It's going to be cost prohibitive, and you're going to have unused capacity. This is very typical in traditional server database environments as well, that customers will, IT shops will over-provision their storage, their traditional spinning media, in order to serve the IOPS that are required for the database workloads. So if you over-provision, you're overspending. If you're under-provisioning, you're underwhelming your users. So how do you kind of get the best of both worlds? Well, you provision storage with ultra-low latency flash devices to meet the peak IOPS needs without wasting that over-provisioning. So you could still have your normal workload provisioning with flash capabilities, low latency, high IOPS capabilities for those peak moments. And that could be several times during the day, either boot storms or, in the case of 24-hour operations, shift changes, where images are being rechecked in, new images are being checked out, and new logins are being accessed. All right, so it's very important to apply flash into VDI environments. So back to our original, what does it look like now with flash? Your traditional desktop PC gets virtualized in a server. Your operating system and applications are abstracted from the hardware and served to many, many, many users. By applying Nitro Megarade and DAS appliances, you get the benefit of that traditional spinning media with the benefit of low latency, high availability, high performance flash integrated on a single card. This is what our customer Tangent has done. If you scale that out to a wide enterprise with many, 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 many virtual desktops being run in a virtual environment across racks and racks of servers in a data center, with SAN attached storage and not DAS attached storage, you could get the same benefit, but this time using Nitro Warp Drive, which can either be used as a primary storage, or it could be used in conjunction with our XD software to accelerate network storage or shared storage. And we've got customers who are doing both of these things today. So SAN storage is a logical adoption within these environments. SSE adoption is critical to get that peak performance capability. So Nitro XD for multi-server, SAN-based VDI deployments, or you could use Nitro Warp Drive as primary storage and host those boot images in the morning boot storm thrush. We talked about a lot of stuff. Again, this isn't a deep dive in VDI. This is to give you vocabulary so you can go have a conversation with the customer or participate in the conversation with the customer talking about VDI, how they're planning, and make sure that they understand that LSI partners, and partner sales and support know that VDI is an opportunity for flash acceleration. You could have that level of conversation. We talked about Nitro Warp Drive cards being an important element, either in direct attach, boot storm, boot image deployment. By applying XD, you could accelerate SANs. So in VDI deployments with SAN-based storage, you can apply XD into the virtualized environment. And now our XD virtualized solution is not available till next quarter, so keep that in mind. But today, you could have Warp Drive in VDI deployments and Nitro Megarade deployments, and we have customers doing this on both ends today. And look for in Q2 for our VMware solution, which will really open up the market for SAN-based VDI deployments. Why do you want Warp Drive? What's the value of Warp Drive? Well, the tenets of LSI Nitro architecture is fast, smart, and easy. So fast is the flash that's integrated onto these cards. Can have throughputs of about 2 gigabytes per second, IOPS at about 220,000 IOPS, extremely low latencies. Again, the difference between memory performance and traditional spinning media, tier 1 storage is about 5 orders of magnitude. So you want to get to millisecond access times. You want to get from millisecond access times to microsecond access times, and flash does that. All of LSI's Nitro products integrate DuraWrite technology This is a technology that extends the life of the flash, provides unparalleled performance across many different types of databases and applications. It frees the host CPU and memory to run the application, so it's an offload card, and it uses RAID-like error correction across the actual NAND flash cells. It's very easy. Nitro Warp Drive drivers are installed in almost all of the Tier 1 operating system distributions. We've got solutions for lots of variants of Linux, as well as being in the kernel. We have Windows support, VMware support on Warp Drive, VMware support for XD and T2. So this is a very powerful, easy-to-use card for acceleration. Nitro Mega RAID is a baby brother to Warp Drive. It, though, includes the ability to use the industry de facto standard Mega RAID stack and protect your hard disk drive with RAID protection and performance, as well as providing integrated flash on a single card. This is the only card in the industry that does this. It has the same tenets as Warp Drive, fast, smart, and easy, and it applies unparalleled RAID protection as well as unparalleled flash performance. So we talked about fast, smart, and easy. Compared to the competition out there, you're not going to find anything easier to install or faster than an LSI Nitro architecture-based solution. So in a nutshell, what did we talk about? VDI virtualizes desktops, just like VMware VMs virtualizes servers and cores in order to run server-based applications. So if you think of the opportunities of flash on the back end with databases, you can now think of flash to the front end to virtualize the deployment of desktops in the VDI or virtualized desktop infrastructure environment. VDI generates new additional random I/O workloads perfect for flash acceleration. The promise of VDI is lower cost once deployed, especially in management costs, and better control over desktop applications and data. The industry is going to move to this. So we need to understand how flash fits into it and how we could better serve the emerging growth opportunities both in server deployments and storage deployments. VDI adds random I/O loads to resources. This is the opportunity for flash, and VDI plays alongside back-end OLTP and OLAP database opportunities. So in the same data center infrastructure, you could have back-end acceleration in your OLTP and OLAP databases to access and gain knowledge from big data, as well as serve that information to your desktop clients through the use of VDI. So in a nutshell, the benefit of VDI for users is freedom to do what you want, what you need to do wherever you are, the flexibility to use any device you need to use, the familiarity with the desktop interface, so you've got the same desktop no matter what device you use, and mobility, the ability to do your work wherever you are, whenever you are, whenever you want. So it could be connected to the network or disconnected from the network, and you've got the same desktop. For IT, the benefits are in cost and control. Control around security, control around the management of the applications and data access, the manageability of the operating systems and patches to both applications and operating systems that are so prevalent in today's fast-moving marketplace. And compliance, they're able to apply the required compliance attributes to the data in the data center that they may or may not be able to do on a traditional client-server environment. So VDI creates flash SSD opportunities. Again, this is not a deep dive into VDI. This is to provide you with a vocabulary to have discussions with your customers. I thank you very much for attending. These are short break webinars, 30 minutes. We appreciate your time and attendance. If you've got any questions, I think we're now going to turn it back over to Emma.